right, guys, welcome to Iowa Basketball Media Day. A couple of announcements. I sent the credential link last week, so a lot of you have filled that out. If you haven't, you can reach out to me and I can get that. When coach is done, well, the player's down on the court, coach is only going to take questions up here, so get your questions here, and we'll go into questions for coach and talk loudly as the transcript. We will have a transcript today. Thank you.
Fran, at point guard, are you expecting one to emerge, or do you think this could be a point guard by committee this year? Not necessarily by committee, but multiple.
We do have a lot of options at that position, Pat. I think we'll see Tony there at times. I think DeSante and Brock and Josh Dix can all play that position. Normally you don't have that many options. Fortunately, all of those guys can also make shots. So sometimes they're sort of forced to be in a distributor position because they're not really scorers at all. So, at the end of the day, we just want to push it. I think all those guys are really good assist guys with no turnovers. I mean, their numbers, from when they started here, and then obviously since the young guys got here, they're really good, and we track that stuff every day. So I trust a lot of those guys, or I should say all four of those guys, to do a good job there.
How much has DeSante grown in the last few months, do you think?
Well, I think last year for DeSante, it was a good year in a lot of ways, but as the season went on, I think as you saw, we shortened the bench a little bit, and in all honesty, I probably should have played him more. I said that before. He and Josh Dix, I thought I should have played them both more. They both played a fair amount, but I think they both deserved to play more and should have played more. With DeSante, I think we played him at both spots. Sometimes when you bring a guy in and you only play him at one spot, he develops in that spot. For him, we were moving him back and forth because he can score and he can distribute. I think the growth part of his game is he's really moving the ball. He's getting rid of the ball more to our shooters, to our guys in the post, on the break. And he's been really good, so I've been really impressed with him.
For people like me who haven't seen Ben Crickey play, what does he do, and how do you see him fitting with you?
Well, he's a perfect fit for us, Mike, and that's why we went so hard at him out of the portal. Clearly we needed that position with the departure of Chris Murray. He's different than Chris, but he's big and physical. He's very athletic. He's got an unbelievable motor. He can really score, and just never really stops working. He's very competitive. I think most importantly, he understands motion. And as you know, if you're going transition to motion, you have to have guys who understand how to play with four other people, how to play fast without making mistakes, how to move without the ball, how to screen and get people open, how to slip when they're switching. And that comes with experience sometimes, and he's obviously an experienced guy. So when you look at the fact that we have 6 new players, 4 of them are freshmen, so you have the learning curve that goes with any freshman. But, when you get a guy like him, the learning curve is a lot shorter because of the experience that he has.
Fran, you played Peyton a lot at the 4 on your foreign trip. How did that feel to you guys?
You know what, Tom, I don't know if I would say we played him at the 4. Maybe he lined up at the 4. Maybe he defended the 4. But he just did the same things he always does. He runs around and scores and really moves well without the ball. I will say this to go along with your question. He is, I think, really making a concerted effort to rebound a lot more. He's always been pretty good at that. We played him a lot at the 2 last year. It's a little bit harder, from there. So his rebounding numbers have been consistently good, in particular on the offensive end. If you want to be a good rebounder, you have to rebound offensively as well. So I think he recognizes that we might be playing essentially 4 perimeter guys and a big at times. So that's great because we can spread the floor and we got a lot of guys who can make threes, but as you know, somebody's got to rebound.
What are just your early impressions of how all the new faces are coming together out of the foreign trip and early in practice?
Yeah, young guys have done really well. I mean, not surprised. Those, we expected all four of them to contribute. Brock has made a seamless transition. I think, Price Sanford, we all know what he is. I mean, those two guys are Mr. Basketball in their state. And Price can really shoot it, but he's also incredibly versatile. Owen Freeman, he's going to be an impact player for us. He's a really good rebounder, physical. He's starting to figure it out. And Lodgy, same thing. He's 260 pounds and knows how to play. He can put it on the floor. He can move the ball and cut. He's doing a little more posting up. He played a lot on the perimeter even at that size in high school. But he's along with Owen. Those two guys are first-class rebounders, big-time rebounders. And obviously we need that. When you look at the fact that, Connor, Chris, and Philip played 3,000 minutes, that's a lot of minutes last year. And so we need some people to step in and make sure we can rebound in this league.
Ed, for the last 4 years, 20-point All-American guys. Is it almost an automatic that things are going to change in terms of balance, in terms of responsibilities and so forth?
Well, I think that's a possibility, a strong possibility, because I think our team is deeper this year, maybe than it's been in quite some time. We probably have 12 guys that I'd be really comfortable playing, and that's not usually the case. So that could manifest itself that way, where we have a number of double-figure scorers, none of them averaging 20. But we have a number of guys who I think are capable of averaging 20. I think, starting with Tony Perkins, and obviously Peyton and Patrick, those guys are all double-figure scorers returning. So depending upon the minutes that they get and how much we go to our bench with our young guys, that'll obviously determine whether or not they could be 20-point scorers, but they're capable of it.
Brandon, between those four freshmen, any of them start to really elevate and you see them carving out a role with this team early on?
All four of them are going to play. They're all good players, and they're not mistake guys. They compete. Sometimes you have a guy whose body's not ready. You say, well, they're really good, and they're going to be good, but it's going to take a year. I wouldn't say that for any of those guys. And they all bring something to the table that's a little different, and that's why we recruited them in the first place. So, I think in any given year, and I mean this, one of them may start, but in any given year, depending upon what we had, all four of those guys I would feel comfortable starting as freshmen because of their feel for the game and their body and their talent level. So I think they all deserve to play. They all will play.
Brady, we've seen Brock play on the court. When it comes to his intangibles and winning state championship in Illinois, what is it about his intangibles that you saw, that you like, and hopefully that you're seeing now here in practice?
Well, there's very few players that are as good as he is with the ball in his hands. I mean, he just makes plays for people consistently, and he keeps the aggressiveness that we want offensively all the time. I mean, he just keeps coming at you, and he keeps attacking, and his decision-making is really good, typically. He's had some days where he tries to hit too many home runs and turns the ball over a little bit, but he comes right back, and he's just going to keep coming at you. The other thing is he can score. A lot of really creative guys off the bounce, they can't shoot the ball outside. They can't hit the pull-up, and they can't hit a three. He can. So he understands if we're running sets, if we're running motion. He understands time and score. And it's not often easy for a young guy to be a leader. He just has innate leadership ability.
Fran, over the years, a lot of players have talked about, you instilling confidence in them. You talk about instilling confidence in your players. As a coach, how do you do that early on with a freshman, and what's the key to really get them to have that level of confidence?
I think the most important thing, when they first get here, it's new, and you have to be patient. And that's the great thing about, when the rules changed and we could start doing things in June, we could get those young guys ready. Like, there's no screaming and yelling in practice. It's teaching. We're going to get better. We watch film together, and they learn and they grow, and they develop confidence because they're not on edge that if I turn the ball over, I'm going to get yelled at. If I miss this shot, I'm going to get yelled at. I'm going to get yanked. The only thing we will address is, was it a bad shot? If you took a bad shot, well, that's going to be addressed. But if you're open, and as you know, I don't really care what the shot clock says. If you're open, shoot the ball. In the last 4 minutes, things might change. Now we got to think. We got to think a little more time and score, protect a lead, or go to our late game package if we're behind. But I stay pretty positive with them. They stay pretty positive with themselves. I will oftentimes correct them if they passed up a shot, if they passed up an opportunity to attack. If I felt at any point in time that they were getting tentative, I would address that just as directly as I would somebody who made a mistake. So I think everybody's comfortable in their own skin in this environment. And obviously, as we get closer to the first game, there becomes a little bit of a greater sense of urgency to do exactly what we need done. But when you play the speed that we play and we're trying to score in the 90s, there's going to be some mistakes. But as you know, a couple of years ago, we led the nation in assist turnover ratio. Connor did it twice. We're going to shoot more free throws than our opponent's attempt. We're going to make more free throws than our opponent's attempt. So that style is going to, create some situations where guys might, go off script a little bit. But if you don't have the luxury to do that, you'll never be the best version of yourself. And that's my responsibility, to get them to play with supreme confidence.
What are you expecting from Tony Perkins this year?
Well, I expect a lot from Tony, and I think he expects a lot from himself. We've had really good leaders in the last couple of years, whether it be, Luka or J-Bo or Connor, Chris and Keegan in their own way. They were both more quiet, but incredibly hard workers, incredibly consistent, and played like veterans even when they were young. So who's going to do that this year? Well, it's going to be Tony, Peyton, and Patrick. There are 3 veteran guys, and so that's what I need Tony to do, especially if he's going to play some at the point.
How have you seen some growth out of Tony and Patrick with this being their senior year last year in the program?
Yeah, well, they both have another year after this if they want it. So that's the new world. But they're mature guys. They're smart kids. They want to win. They both have competed in a program that had a winning culture. Even when Tony wasn't playing as much his freshman year, we had Luka and Weezy and those guys. We were a high seed, and he got a chance to experience all that. How do you conduct yourself in practice? How do you conduct yourself in the off season? How do you handle a loss? How do you handle a bad night? You had a bad night. And then how do you help those young guys get through that? At some point you're going to have a stinker. How do you respond? And how do you come back from that? And sometimes it's more important that those guys do it than the coaches themselves. You hear it from your teammates, and Patrick and Tony have been really lucky. They've had great examples. I mean, Connor was really good for Tony. Connor knew exactly how to talk to him, and he did the same for a lot of other people. He was a terrific leader. So hopefully Patrick and Tony and Peyton can step up in that area.
Fran, the conference has expanded again. What do you think about the expansion within the conference, and if you're only playing teams one time a year, basically the entire conference one time a year?
Yeah, I would say this, Tom. Just don't overthink it. That's the world we live in. Conference expansion. We're not the only team that did it. The only conference that did it. Everybody else did it. We can debate all the reasons for it. We know what the main reasons are. I think it makes our conference pretty impressive. We're bi-coastal. A lot of big-name programs, a lot of teams with expectation to make the NCAA tournament, a lot of interest from a TV standpoint, from a fan base standpoint. You think about the number of alums throughout the country from all those places and how they'll support this conference. So, I don't look at it like, okay, do I like it? Do I not like it? Should it have gone differently? I deal with what it is, what the facts are. This is who's in our league. This is who we play. Every year they'll give us a schedule. It won't be the same teams every year, and we'll prepare to play those guys when we see them on our schedule.
And for most of the last 4 or 5 years, for what little it's worth, you guys have been undervalued in the preseason. Is this another such year?
Well, I think potentially, Mike, and I think most coaches would always answer that question the same way. I'm not really concerned with what people think of us in the preseason. I mean, in all honesty, how are you guys supposed to evaluate teams anymore when rosters changed 8 or 9 guys? It used to be pretty easy to do that. Okay, they've got 4 starters back, and they've got their top 2 subs back. They got X number of points back. Okay, they're probably going to finish near the top of the league, right? But now, who bought who, and what does that lead to? And sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's not, because the guy doesn't fit. So we have to wait. So we just approach it this way. We really like our team. I have a tremendous sense of maturity in that locker room. We've got a lot of different guys who can play. We have a lot of different guys who bring different things to the table. Oftentimes when you're not maybe thought of as much is because they don't think you can score. But we're not going to have a problem there. We can score. We've got a lot of different guys that make threes. We have way more size than we've had probably in the last 5 years. So we should be able to rebound pretty well, which obviously triggers the break. So I feel really good about this team.
How important is it to always maintain that experienced core of players in this time of transfers and everything?
I think it's really important because those guys remain in your system. You can sign a bunch of old guys that come in and they're all playing as individuals. They all sought something in particular that they were not happy about where they were. I'm going to get more shots. I'm going to be the man. And then all of a sudden you're not, and you have no chemistry and camaraderie in the locker room. And everybody says, boy, I thought that team would do better. But, they weren't a team. They were a bunch of individuals. So I think if you have a veteran group coming back and you have some veteran guys, and even if you have some veteran guys that played but will now play more, it's certainly a lot easier, especially when you're trying to implement a system.
Coach, you mentioned Peyton Sanford might be one of those guys that can really step up in his scoring and his role in the team. What about his game and what you've seen lately makes you believe that?
Well, he's got a complete skill set, and that's why we recruited him in the first place. He's always been a great shooter. He was recognized by our league as 6th Man of the Year. That's a really impressive thing to have on your resume. Our league is so good and it's so deep. I think you could look last year and say, there was probably 3 or 4 games that you could argue that he won for us almost by himself. And that's impressive as well. So, he's physically in a really good place. Now he's in year 3 with going through the lifting cycles. So his body's in a good place. I think he's very confident in himself. And we need him to be special this year. And I think he expects that of himself.
Just looking at Lodgy, just watching some of his film, he just seems like there's a certain uniqueness to his game and maybe a different style of player than you've had in the past couple of years. How would you describe Lodgy for people a lot of people haven't even seen him play?
Yeah, the thing about Lodgy, he's been really impressive since he got here, but there's more in there. I think my biggest challenge so far with him has been to get him to be more aggressive, both physically in terms of posting up, but more aggressive as a scorer. Because what he has done, he's been a physical defender and he has been a phenomenal rebounder. But he can score, and he can pass the ball. He moves the ball. He doesn't fight the game. He understands the game and makes plays, and is a guy who comes from a very, very successful high school program that also had really good players. So he wasn't asked to, okay, you got to go to 25-10 or we have no chance to win. You know, he wasn't, nor was anybody else on that team that guy, because they were all trying to get 12 to 15 points and win. So he knows how to win. And there's times when I would just like to see him be a little more aggressive, shooting the ball, driving the ball, and posting up. And I think we'll eventually see that.
Has there been just an individual or two that you've been really encouraged by? You know, they've stood out of what they've done kind of up to this point?
You know, I think you could almost say that at the end of each week, and we've been gone since June. You know, there's been weeks when I've said, boy, you know, Brock and Price were really good, and then it was Lodgy and Owen. You know, I think Cricky's a guy that has really been consistent. He's been impressive, and we sort of hoped and expected he would be that guy, especially because we had such a need in that area. He has been special, I think, pretty much every day. And the other guys, I think, that you would have expected to be, you know, Peyton and Patrick and Tony, may have been those three guys. But the freshmen have had very few days where you said, boy, okay, it's going to be a while before they help us. They might have a bad day or two, but not many.
I think the first two games overseas, Owen had like 31 rebounds. What have you seen from him from that perspective? How has he been able to be so good that quick?
What's impressive about that is he only played half the game. You know, so that's really a lot of rebounds when you think about it. Now, the games were kind of up and down and free-flowing, but still, he was pounding the offensive glass and getting putbacks and scoring the ball as well. He's a guy that when we signed him, we felt like, okay, he's going to be an impact player as a freshman. You know, and again, especially when the freshman's 6'10", you know, Aaron White was what, 6'9", like 195 when he was a freshman, and we didn't know what he would be, and he ended up being a really good player, but not immediately. It took him about, you know, 30-40% to get through the season. You know, Owen's already 235, and he's pretty bouncy. And right now he's just trying to figure out where to go in the offense. And I just keep trying to tell him to trust his talent, just move without the ball, and don't be afraid to shoot. His shot looks pretty good. He didn't shoot it as much in high school from the perimeter as I think he should have. He's really worked on that, and he's making some perimeter shots too.
Ricky was such a dominant player at Valpo, leading the Valley in scoring. At that position, is there ever concern going to the Big Ten with much bigger post players that you wouldn't be able to keep up the same kind of production from that post position?
No, you know, I mean, if he were, you know, 6'6", 195 and doing that at Valpo, but he's 6'9", 245. There's not many guys any bigger than him in our league, and he's quick, and he's smart, and he's tough, and he's aggressive. And to be honest with you, I think it'll actually be easier for him here because he got doubled and tripled way more there than he will here.
You mentioned Tony and Patrick could come back. How do you handle those conversations? Obviously, one of them will be with your own son, but and how soon do you need to know? Because you're also filling out a recruiting class.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a very fair question, but one that, you know, doesn't really have a direct answer because, you know, I'm not going to sit down Tony and say, hey, what are you going to do 2 years from now? You know, it's like I need him to play well today in practice and be ready to lead this team. Same with Patrick. And you're right, that could potentially present problems. The season ends and they both say we're just going to go play professional basketball somewhere, even if we're not drafted in the first round. Or, you know, we're going to go shop ourselves and try to make money at another university that's paying a lot of money. And that's not something we thought was not a conversation we would have had 5 years ago, but it's reality. So, I just, it's not something I want them obsessing about. It's not something that I'm going to obsess about. If they're here, that's great. If they go somewhere else, we'll get somebody else.
Sure. With the mixture of the youth and the experience, have you seen that chemistry grow quite a bit since June? And how do you?
Yeah, I've tried to mix the lineups up a little bit so that they're not always playing with the same guys, because that's what's going to happen when the season starts. We're going to be rotating different positions. We'll go big, we'll go small. We might, have a bunch of young guys out there at some point in time. And I have had the young guys together some, and they've competed well.
Time for one or two more.
Fran, it seems like, just reading between the lines, that the freshmen have really done a good job playing alongside one another. The transition's been really good. It helps that Owen and Brock play on the same high school team. But when you're out recruiting and planning out your recruiting class, how important is it amongst you and your staff to really have conversations about, okay, this might be a better fit for the guys that we already have committed, or what's your kind of approach to that?
Well, we're always looking for a fit. Not to say that you wouldn't sign a guy that had a particular skill that was separating him from everybody else. Maybe they just have tremendous athletic power, or they just have phenomenal speed and quickness. But the style that we play, we need versatile guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot, play more than one position, defend more than one position. So we tend to shift more in that direction in the recruiting process. That said, if you do have, like last year, for example, we knew Connor, Chris, and Phillip were going to be gone. Connor and Chris had no eligibility left, and we knew Chris was going to go in the first round. So he was not staying here. So that made it a little bit different in terms of how we approached recruiting than maybe we will this year.
You mentioned NIL. How much specifically for you and your staff, how much of a challenge is that to make sure that guys don't go somewhere else because they're having money thrown at them? And is there any way you can combat that, I guess?
It's really hard to combat if a guy really wants to shop himself, because there's nothing to preclude him from doing that. The only thing we can do is try to do the best we can to be as fair as we possibly can and work to that end so that they get compensated when they're here. If everybody's looking for more money, you can find it somewhere. It's the flaw in the system as we sit here today, but they haven't fixed it, so that's the reality that we're dealt with. But I think it's possible you would always lose a guy potentially because the money is so dramatically different. But I also believe if you take care of your people, they'll have some sense of loyalty and want to stay, and that's how we're going to approach it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.